everyone, Clack of the Geek here. Welcome back to the TV discussion series, and today we're talking about Inside No.9 yet again, but not the past. We're in the present right now because Series 7 has unfortunately ended. Fortunately, this has been one of the greatest series of this show. I mean, first of all, right, it astounds me that we've had 7 seasons. 7 seasons of this show. Like, most shows don't even get half of that these days, like scripted dramas. And even then, something as niche as No.9 in any other universe would have been cancelled well before this. Like, 7 series? That's insane. But I'm not complaining because I love No.9. And this series somehow does even more unexpected things, even more experimental things. I mean, I genuinely haven't got a clue how they're gonna do this. Like, we've had an episode set outdoors and on location here. We've had some weird episodes this season. We've had a split screen episode. We've had a sci-fi one. We've had animated segments in one. No matter if you don't like this series or not, well, that's fine. But you can't deny that this season has been arguably the most daring of the whole lot. And aside from Series 3 is my favourite series, but aside from that one, this is my second favourite of the whole show because I just think it's absolutely been fantastic. And I will be going through now every episode of the season, talking about them. There will be spoilers, obviously, but let's get to it. I forgot what I was going to do then. Yeah, let's get to it. So we kick things off with this series with, in my opinion, one of the strongest series openers of No.9, Merrily, Merrily. Yeah, I think this is one of the best openers that we've had with No.9, and just one of the strongest, one of the most structurally sound, and just one of the most enjoyable that I've had. So the plot of this one is about these friends from university meeting up after years and years on a boat ride, and just like reminiscing on the past. And so you've got, obviously, Reese, who organised it all, and you've got Steve with his girlfriend as well, played by Diane Morgan, who is amazing in this episode, who's just hilarious. And then you've also got Mark Gatiss, who obviously people know from the League of Gentlemen that Reese and Steve were in. And that metatextual awareness, that kind of that context of, these old friends that we've all known who have, been creatively together, and to see them again in something, after all these years, after the League of Gentlemen ended years ago. I know it's had reunions since, but the main show ended about 20 years ago. So it is just nice to see them back together as a group, and it's that context that even on a first watch, it engages you. It engages you on that feeling of friendship and your best years being behind you. This episode tried to definitely go for the more emotional route, like 12 Days of Christine, for example. And whilst not as good as that one, I definitely think it succeeded as, especially with Reese, Steve and Mark's characters, all of them had really emotional, not tragic, but just quite sort of bittersweet characters and backstories to them. And I really, felt for all of them. The way that Mark's character, feels unfulfilled by, being achieving at university, he feels his life is unfulfilled. I thought that was quite impactful. Reese's thing, where, he's reminiscing on the past, but then it turns out he's there because his wife had died, and then, that he's there to spread her ashes and, kind of die and join with her. I thought I'll get onto that afterwards, because that kind of plays into the whole twist thing. But my favourite character was Steve's character, Darren, who is initially presented as kind of a bit of an idiot, and he's obviously with his girlfriend. He calls a peddler a pedo. He's writing a children's book. He wants to get a career in writing, but also the book he's writing is just a simple, My First Words book. But then it's revealed later in the episode that his character has dyslexia, and how much this book means to him, and how, these kind of jokes and jabs at him are kind of, recontextualised, and you do feel really sorry for him, and how he's kind of, this book that he's writing is a real achievement. I thought that was really, really beautiful, and it really resonated with me, as I thought that was absolutely brilliant. So at the end of the episode, you have Reese's character, who is, the reason he's there is because his wife has died, and he's there to reminisce on the past, spread her ashes, and essentially die to be with her. That's what I got from the episode. And he dies from the cold, and in the last scene of the episode, it's daytime now, even though it'd been nighttime, and he's on a boat, and it's a reference. This whole thing of it's a reference to Charon, which is something in Greek mythology, and it's that whole imagery of the boat parallels that old like Greek myth. I think it's to do with Hades, but it's that kind of thing. And overall, I thought that was a very creative, abstract way to portray a character dying. It wasn't just, you saw their cold, lifeless body overnight. I thought that was quite clever, and it added a new perspective because Reese saw the empty pedalo, and it's like, what happened to everyone else? And it's like, they're on the other side. And I think it was quite clever, and it had a bit of sort of hope, a little bit of optimism, because, Reese is dead, but now he'll be, with his wife, in the afterlife, I guess, and, all his friends on the boat, they're still alive. And I like that kind of optimism and portraying it through this more abstract, mythical kind of way. I thought that was very creative, and I really admired that. Another thing that I love about this episode is, pardon the pun here, they were pushing the boat out with how they could, storytell with it not being set indoors, but obviously set outdoors at a lake, but in a boat, obviously. And it allowed for some really great cinematography that I thought is some of the best that we've had in No.9, as well as a great Christian Henson score, whose music is always fabulous in this series. But yeah, overall, I will give this a 9 out of 10. A really damn strong opener, in my opinion. Episode 2 now, Mr. King. This one was a trip, but I really loved it. I really did. It's not perfect, though. So the premise of this episode is that Reese plays a new teacher at the school, Mr. Curtis. It's a Welsh primary school in the rural area, and you've got Steve there as the head teacher of the school, and you've also got Annette Banland, who Doctor Who fans will know was one of the Slovene. She's there as like the caretaker of the school, and you've got obviously a class full of kids. It's set in class number 9 here, and Reese's teacher is very much the fish out of water character. It's sort of League of Gentlemen kind of vibe of kind of like folk horror and local stuff, that kind of vibe. And I love League of Gentlemen, so I really got a lot out of this. I love the setting. I always thought No.9 set in a school would always have been really interesting, so that was quite good. I think all the performances from the 3 main leads were all great. Steve's Welsh I thought was very good, and I know a bit of Welsh, and it was actually quite accurate. Annette Badland was quite funny as Winnie, the cleaner. I think she was quite funny. And then Reese kind of was the main focus of the episode. I think he was very good, and like filling in the shoes of this older teacher that they'd had, Mr. King, who was clearly very popular. So it's kind of like imposter syndrome, and like, well, what do I do, and who was this guy? And he was very good. I also thought the kid actors were very good as well, particularly Kerry, who was sort of the main of the kids, but she was really good. And I thought there was a scene around the 10-minute mark between Reese and Kerry that it was like discussing, because the episode that they've been meant to be learning about like climate change, and Reese's character, he's not really sugarcoating it for the primary school kids. He's very much telling them about like, all these Extinction Rebellion, like these activist groups, and the kids are going to look these things up, and Kerry was very upset by it. And I think that was a really effective scene, because a lot of these days, kids year on year get exposed to horrible things about the world, but they're not getting any older. They keep getting younger and younger, especially with the advent of social media. That becomes a hell of a lot more prevalent. I think that could have been a really great thing to explore. And then for the next 10 minutes, it didn't really get explored. And here's my only real gripe with the episode, is that they kind of go on a bit of a red herring that Mr. Curtis, Reese's character, might be a bit of a pedo, and there's some really uncomfortable scenes. But the fact that it's a red herring means it's kind of meaningless and pointless, and it just felt a bit in bad taste, that section of the episode, in my opinion. But then, at the end of the episode, it goes full on Wicker Man. The school and the teachers, it's a big cult ritual, and Reese is going to get sacrificed to, help grow the crops and prevent a natural disaster. That is just, it is an absolute trip, and it is insane, but I loved it. I really just loved how insane and mental it was, and just how crazy and twisted. I just loved that kind of stuff, and it made me really want to watch the Wicker Man film, the 73 one with Christopher Lee and whatnot. So I will give this episode an 8 out of 10. I thought it was really strong, but that middle bit of the episode did off-put me in the wrong sort of way. Then after a week off the air, Series 7 was back for its third episode, 9 Lives Cat. In my eyes, it wasn't worth the 2-week wait, because this was my least favourite of the season, and one of my least favourites of the entire show, in my opinion. I just found it, honestly, mediocre. So it starts off as a very kind of typical crime drama with this character, Cat, who's a detective, who's trying to look, in the case of a missing child, and Steve's there with this kind of mysterious figure, and it is very typical at this point, and I kind of did figure that something was up, because, it's not, number 9 is never normally this typical, but it's revealed that this whole thing is fictional. Steve's character is a writer, and this crime story that he's created with this character, Cat, that he's created, it was a very sort of dull, first draft kind of bland character, and it's just a story idea that's just been ignored and left in a drawer to sit, and yeah, that explains why a lot of these characters are kind of generic. So it is intentional. And then you've got Reese's character, who is another kind of detective sort of character, who is very much like a kind of autistic genius stereotype, that kind of thing, and I do get the point of the episode. It's trying to present these really naff, like, stereotypes and boring characters, it's trying to present that to the audience, and also this kind of meta-fiction of, like, writers' ideas, what happens to the ideas that never get solved. That is a kind of cool idea, and I can see the brilliance within that. There's a big problem here, though, and for me, that is the fact that when it was revealed that the first bit was fiction, and it very much is like an Inception, like it's a fiction within a fiction, because it's revealed there's another writer who's writing all of this, and Steve was actually a character. When you get to that, but actually before you've got to that, I'm just thinking, well, if that was just fiction, then all of this now could be fiction, so why should I care what happens if I'm not going to get invested, am I? And then I just zoned out the episode. I didn't find it interesting because I didn't care, because I wasn't given a reason to care. Because nothing that happened, and it all could have ended up being completely false. So I wasn't invested, and thus I felt indifferent to it, which never normally happens with number 9. I never normally felt indifferent towards it, but that's just how I felt here. And like the last twist of the episode really is the only place they could have gone, and so it kind of feels very predictable, and it just kind of, yeah, I appreciate the meta stuff with, writers and ideas. I appreciate that kind of stuff, but on a structural level, this one didn't work very well for me. So I'm giving it a 6.5 out of 10. This one, yeah, not great. I was starting to worry at this point in the series that maybe this series might be quite a weak one, and that there won't be any standout episodes. These final 3 proved me wrong, starting with Kidnapped, or Kid/Nap, technically. And I adored this episode. Now, I've heard a couple of people say that this one was a bit generic, and it just felt a bit like a generic ITV crime drama kind of thing. And, obviously I respect those opinions, but personally, I majorly disagree. I think, while it might seem like that on the surface, and the main story beats do kind of follow that, 1, the presentation style, and 2, the way it flips certain parts of it on its head, do make it, for me at least, stand out in the pantheon of crime dramas that we've had, on British TV. First of all, this episode is partly split screen, so you've got, sometimes it's a full screen, sometimes it's 2 screens, and sometimes it's 3, and that unpredictable nature of it, just like, if it was just like, it was always going to be one sterile shot of just 2 screens, say, side by side, I think that could have got a bit boring, but the way it's so unpredictable, because the split screen effect is used to build tension and used for dramatic irony of, like, we know more than the characters, even though some characters are in the exact same room, so it creates a lot of tension there, especially in that phone call scene when, you've got the hostage and the kidnapper in the same building, but both don't know what's going on, but we all know. But seeing them very quickly realise what's going on to each other, it makes it very effective in my opinion. But the fact that you don't always get that makes it very unpredictable when you do, and then when you don't always know what you get to see. It makes it really exciting and gripping for me. But the split screen can be used also for some comedic effect, like at the beginning when you've got like we and be like contrasted in the same shot. It's just, it can be really done well, and I've missed like a proper like narrative unique presentation like the likes of Cold Comfort or The Devil of Christmas, which very unique. I've missed an episode like we haven't had one since about series 5, I think. Yeah, it's just great to see one again. This directed by Al Campbell as well, and his direction and use of the split screen just makes it work so well, and he's really up there as one of number 9's best directors. Also, all of the performances in this episode were fantastic. You got Jason Isaacs, who was very surprising. I didn't expect him to play the more kind of like a bit jovial, a bit warmer character, but he was quite good to see. Daniel Mays was so slimy and sinister, but brilliant. Daisy Haggard, she really showed great range in her performance, and I like how Reese and Steve were more background roles and like more side characters, and I love how they're kind of, you know, not like Reese wasn't the dark one, and you know Reese is kind of a bit of a more comedic, idiotic character, and Steve was the straight man in this, which doesn't tend to be the case, but I like that kind of switch up. But another reason why I think this isn't very conventional and why I think it works is because it's very playful with this kind of, you know, dark crime investigation kind of drama, you know, stereotype. It kind of is more playful with it in a similar vein to Tarantino's Reservoir Dogs. I know that's more of a heist movie, but it's that kind of tone where it does take a dark concept and be more playful with it. So there's a scene which actually does remind me of that film where it appears that Laura, Daisy Haggard's character, is getting her ear cut off, a bit like in that film, although they don't play Steelers Wheel in this episode, which really they should have. That would have elevated this to an 11 out of 10. But anyway, yeah, it is a very horrifying scene in the moment, but then the reveal of what happens afterwards, it is quite, you know, amusing and quite playful. And a lot of the twists and character revelations and, you know, events in the episode, especially near the end, when you think about it, it is quite playful and a bit funny and a bit ironic, and I really liked it. So, I mean, I'd give Reservoir Dogs a 10 out of 10, and I also give Kid/Nap a 10 out of 10. Episode 5, A Random Act of Kindness. This was a brilliant double episode, double E. The amount of times I've rehearsed that and not got it wrong, man, that was tricky to practice. Anyway, I'm not going to do the entire video because that'll be ball-ache, but anyway, this was another stellar episode. So it initially starts off as a simple kind of kitchen sink drama between a mother and a teenage son, and the kind of trials and tribulations that period of a child's life goes, you know, teenage years, and the strain that can have with relationships with parents and whatnot. And that central relationship is so strong, so powerful, so gritty and realistic. It's very natural. Both of the actors are great. I mean, you've got Jessica Hines playing the mother, and she's always brilliant in anything. I need to watch more of Spaced, but either way, yeah, she's great in anything. She was fantastic here. She was quite funny, but also, you know, as the episode goes on, the emotions heighten, and it just gets, the emotion of them, the character stuff gets more and more powerful and resonant as it goes on, and it's just brilliant. And the kind of theme of sort of, you know, loving what you've got around you and like appreciating what you have before it's gone, because there's not a lot of time left. It's a brilliant, beautiful, very resonant message for all people, and especially of that age. And I think it is kind of that idea of, you know, for this episode, this character of Zach, this is the point where he will mature into an adult, through the help of Bob, played by Pemberton, which I'll get onto the twist in a second of who he really is. But it is that sort of maturing and, you know, getting a bit of world weariness, and I think that's why it works. But then at the beginning of the episode, you've also got this character Bob, who enters these characters' lives, and, you know, he's a lovable character. He wants to do the right thing. He wants to help out. You know, wants to help both of them. But then it's revealed around like the 20-minute mark, I think, that Bob is actually Zach from the future. Now, when you look at the episode, there are quite a few clues, and they're not even very simple clues, whether it's like physical appearance from the way they act, that you can look back on in retrospect. But I didn't anticipate the twist, purely because I didn't think number 9 would go sci-fi, purely because people would make the comparison that it's just a bit like Black Mirror, because that's the kind of stuff that Black Mirror does. But I'm so glad that number 9 has done a sci-fi episode, because I love some sci-fi. It's probably my favourite genre. So, you know, number 9 and sci-fi, what more do you want? I mean, that is just, it's a match made in heaven. And it also helps us understand what the point of Reese's scenes are, because there's just scenes of him, like cutaways, where he's in this futuristic looking lab explaining Newton's laws of physics and whatnot. And it just seemed at first very random, but then it clicks into place. And the fact that Zach has come back in time to help Zach appreciate his mother, and all because she's got a terminal illness, and he ends up finding the cure for it. And that's it. This is like him going back to sort of be the catalyst for him to find the cure. It's very wibbly wobbly timey-wimey, but me explaining time travel is rubbish, but it's a really beautiful plot. But then in the last act of the episode, the last 10 minutes, we see the consequences of what Bob has done, because Bob and also Reese's character, they both were able to create time travel in the future, and because of what Bob has done by going in the past, it has created ripple effects and alternate timelines, and it's affected many different people, including Reese's character. So he wants revenge, and these aren't always avenues that you think about, and it is really interesting how how it's the butterfly effect. One little thing causes ripples in time and all this kind of stuff, and how it can screw over people. And Reese wants revenge, and it's a nice number 9 flourish to sci-fi, and I love that. But the character drama is still at the forefront. It's a bit like the 2013 film Her, starring Joaquin Phoenix. Very good film, but it is very much in that film and in this episode. This episode more so. The character stuff, the sci-fi stuff is more of an aesthetic. The character drama and the development and the strong writing is at the forefront. And for that, I've got to give this a 10 out of 10. Episode 6, Wise Owl, which is a new favourite of mine. This is definitely the one that from the trailer I was probably most excited by because of the animation segments that we had. Basically, it's taking inspiration from the old Charlie Say's 1970s public information films, those, kind of off-putting by today's standards animated, short films, educating obviously children, but they're kind of creepy. And let me just say, those segments of the episode, because it's not just them recreating old PSAs, even though there are a couple which do that, and they're done phenomenally. A lot of them are used to fill in gaps within the story, in a way, like to show the character's childhood, and the animation is spot on, and it's an absolute treat. So that mainly focuses on Reese, and he's very much the star of the show, with Steve very much taking more of a background role in this episode. But Reese is stellar. He really does steal the show here. His character Ronnie is very weird and offbeat, but he's just a brilliant character, very interesting. You just want to learn more about him. He's just very mysterious, and you want to understand what's going on with him. There's also a little thing with Reese's character that is like sort of he also taxidermies animals as well, and there are some really horrible moments. Like there's an animated film segment with the wise owl character teaching children how to taxidermy animals, and it's just horrifying. They rip a cat's skin off and they poke its eyes out. It's horrible. And then there's another moment as well with the horror when a real life kind of man in an owl costume peers over the door, and that really got under my skin personally. Later in the episode, we're introduced to Ronnie's father, who was the voice of the wise owl character back in the 1970s PSAs and whatnot. And also we learn that these PSAs and the animation segments are filling in for Ronnie's childhood, and I think it's a really creative way of doing that. And there's a bit of irony where the fact that there was an instant where they were playing with fire as children, and it got Ronnie's sister killed, and it's quite mysterious and quite kind of ironic, and it uses that unique presentation of the animation of those old PSAs. It's the perfect kind of number 9 where they use that gimmick to full effect. There's all these little clues seeded into the episode, like Ronnie's father takes a drink of alcohol, and that's clearly meant to be something important, and just plenty of little things that are dropped in, and then we get to see that matches PSA thing again, but with Reese there instead, not just animate, but him there, and then we see the full picture, and it turns out that Ronnie's father was negligent to the whole thing due to alcohol, let it happen, and then ended up abusing Ronnie as a child to shut him up and save his career. And it's all because of the alcohol. And it's just, it doesn't need to explicitly say it. It's just the visual of the wise owl character with a load of beer and being drunk. And it hits like a ton of bricks. It does remind you of some of the most disturbing PSAs that are out there. You know, the really disturbing ones that you can find. And it's just, it hits like a ton of bricks, that ending. Now, I did see this pointed out, but it is also like the very first episode of the show, Sardines, where the theme of child abuse is covered. But here, I think it's much more clever, much more interestingly done. There's a twinge of irony with it being, you know, the abuser was also the mouthpiece of PSAs back in the day, that kind of thing. It's just that it's much cleverly done. And as well, the resolution to it all, instead of taking violent action and revenge against the abuser, Ronnie doesn't do that, even though it seems like he will, but he chooses to walk away and grow up and, you know, get past this horrible person. And I find that such a profound ending. And it is given, this is one of the best episodes of this show. I'm going to give it a 10. Twit you. So that was Series 7 and the episodes that comprised it. I'll leave a little ranking on the screen now, but overall, now I want to hear from you guys what you thought of Series 7. Did you enjoy it? Did you love it? Did you not think it was that good? Anything, let me know in the comments below. Let me know all your thoughts on the episodes. Like, subscribe, click the bell so you don't miss a thing, all that good stuff, and this Clack of the Geek signing out. Goodbye, everyone.